you can structure your company to look any way you want to. You get what you put up with, right? You get what you settle for. And I settled for thinking that I had to work 120 hours a week in order to make great money. And don't get me wrong, it got me to, a great income. I had no time freedom, and then I was like, I guess the only way to make more money is to work more, which is false, and I just had to restructure the way I do business, which is now what, being, more on the private equity investment side. And again, looking at every deal for what is the most profitable way for me when I look at a piece of real estate.
Welcome to the How to Scale Commercial Real Estate Show. Whether you are an active or passive investor, we'll teach you how to scale your real estate investing business into something big.
Henry Eisenstein has sold and been a part of over $300 million worth of real estate transactions. Henry, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Sam. Appreciate it.
Hey, man, the pleasure's mine. Listen, there are 3 questions I ask every guest who comes on the show. In 90 seconds or less, can you tell me, where did you start? Where are you now? And how did you get there?
So I was the depressed, quiet kid in the back of the room back in elementary school. Dropped out twice out of college. And then a buddy of mine basically said he was making a ton of money selling real estate. Long story short, that was a lie. And so I lost my shirt the first few years in real estate. I learned how to make investors a lot of money, and figured I was on the wrong side of the table. So I spent the last half decade learning how to do that. So, I don't know. It might be a little faster than 90 seconds, but
I think that was like 14, whatever. No, it's great. No, I love it, man. That's funny you say that you saw a buddy making a ton of money in real estate, selling real estate, and you said that was a lie. Why do you say that?
So, he's like, he made $20,000 in a month. I was like, wow, that's more money than I had made in half the year at the time when I was 20 years old. And then I found out he was selling his mom's house, helping his mom buy a house. And it was like one other close friend, and he never made more than 20 grand a month ever again. So, yeah.
Right. You stuck with it though. I mean, you said you did that for a few years.
Yeah, 2 years. And then actually I quit the business for about 6 months, went to a Tony Robbins event, changed my life forever. And I got back in the business with a vengeance. And it served me pretty well.
Okay. I like this story. Tell me, you went to a Tony Robbins event, it changed your life, and then you said, I'm getting back into real estate. What happened?
Yeah, so I quit the business because, I blamed the industry instead of myself, which was my first mistake. And, I was just doing the wrong things, and I wasn't seeing the result from it. I quit the business, was just kind of putting around doing a bunch of different business ventures that went absolutely nowhere. I went to a Tony Robbins event, got a business coach, and my business coach told me 2018 January. He's like, listen, kid, I was 23 at the time. I'm 27, about to be 28 next month. And he's like, who do you know that you've ever studied or listened to out in the world, super successful, who had 5 different companies at 23 years old and became wildly successful? It's like, not a single person I've ever met. And he's like, great, you're not about to be the first one. So he's like, you got to focus on one thing for a decade, and I promise you'll be successful. And he was not wrong. So I got back in the business, super focused, got a little bit more clear on exactly what I need to do on a day-to-day. And thankfully it worked out.
How hard was it focusing on one thing? I mean, that's something that entrepreneurs, myself, even you're convicting the interviewer here today. I've got 2 different lines of business that I am definitely involved in. Some of them overlap, but not entirely. How did you focus?
I think it was a blessing in disguise to quit, when I quit, because it gave me the out, like to really taste the grass is greener thing. I tasted the grass on the other side and it sucked, and it was not greener. And, but, again, I feel like the grass is greener just where you water it. It's not, once you stay focused and you do the right things, you can be successful in any industry if you choose to. And I knew what to do in real estate. I just, I was doing, a bunch of other things that weren't working. So I got back into business, focused on making my calls. I got really good at cold calling and changed everything for me.
Cold calling. Okay. But you had to have a focus when you got back into the business, using the word focus. I mean, sure. You don't just jump back in like, okay, hey, it sounded like you were doing residential real estate there for the first.
On resi first. Yep.
Right. Okay. When you got back into real estate, was it still focused on residential, or had you shifted what you were working on?
Yeah. Commercial didn't happen for about 2.5 years. So first 2.5 years in the business, called 6. So like first 3 were resi, and the last 3 has been a bit of mix, but more so on the commercial side in the last 24 months or so. So right when I got back in the business, I basically spent 18 hours a day cold calling. So I actually went through my dialer recently because I post a lot of YouTube videos, and I was like, it'd be kind of interesting to know actually how many calls I made. It was like over 400,000 calls in a matter of 36 months. So it was, and that was just through the dialer. That was not just, normal dials that you'd make on your cell phone every day. So quite a number to achieve some result,
What were you dialing for?
Mostly expired, circle prospect. I mean, I was looking for listings, but like a majority of also what I had built out in the meantime, which is kind of a niche for working with investors, which is what I still focus on today, just in a different scale. But I learned how to basically prospect for investment deals.
So this is on the commercial real estate side. You are using your dialer. You're calling out to find commercial assets to put under contract to then sell to other investors.
Partially now, but yeah, I mean, it originally started with just trying to find fix and flips, right? That's where it stemmed from. And then now it's turned into, I have a whole acquisitions department that I run in several different states and, several different asset classes now. And, we do a mix of, every type of marketing you can imagine.
So when for those fix and flip properties, was this stuff for you to fix and flip, or was this stuff you were then wholesaling to other fix and flippers?
Yeah. So I focused mostly on the agent side at the time. But again, it's kind of interesting. I made them millions and millions and millions of dollars. And I was young, but I made about $1 million by the time I was 26. And it just, it changed everything for me. I made them a ton. And it was just like, it basically set me up for success once I figured out, because I learned through them. I learned through their experiences. So I made decent money, but instead, like I basically got paid for an education, which was, it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me.
Absolutely. So once you start seeing these, so you make $1 million, you make your investors a whole bunch of money. You're dialing like crazy. When did you, or what was the major shift in the business that takes it to where it is today?
COVID took it. Rather. COVID did. COVID changed everything for me.
Okay.
Going into COVID, I was 25 years old, 24 years old, 25, 24. Thankfully, I lived at home because I lost everything. I had $1 million a year revenue business, but I was spending, 50 G's a month just in salaries and unnecessary cost and living a high life and blah, blah, blah. And COVID took me to zero real quick. Wow. And I wasn't cash heavy. I made a lot of mistakes. And what COVID taught me was to live lean to me. And I rebuilt it back and then some within 9 months, but I did it without, with virtually no staff. I had like 2 versus 13. And, thankfully at that time, one of my mentors basically said to me, listen, the market, and this was back at the end of end of 2020. My mentor goes to me, listen, a lot of realtors are thinking this is going to last forever, and I need you to start acting like this is going to end tomorrow. So you need to figure out how, if you sold half the amount of properties tomorrow, how would you make more money this year? If you still wanted to increase your business and still bring home more money, but you're going to sell half as much properties, how would you do it? And it was just a complete mind shift for me. So, but in the middle of 2020 or towards the end of it, I flipped into a lot more commercial and private equity and investments.
That is so is that the answer to the problem, which was moving into commercial assets? You're doing half the transactions, but making the same twice as much money. That was the equation.
3 times as much money. Yeah. So it's like, I basically kind of said to myself, like, if I wanted to work 10 or 20 hours a week, what would I have to do in order to sell, still make more money? And a big part of it is become the investor, and if you become the investor and stop selling them as an agent, because you're helping other people make millions while you make tens of thousands of dollars.
Right.
So you're exchange, and listen, don't get me wrong, to get started, I don't disagree. You should definitely start off that way. So, because you can learn on somebody else's dime instead of making the mistakes on your own. But eventually you got to take the leap. And thankfully I took the leap and I haven't looked back since.
Yeah, there are compelling reasons to be an agent or to be a broker, I think, and it's strange, and I'm gonna disagree with you a little bit in this, but probably also agree with you in the end that yes, you just need to be an investor. I mean, that's where it comes down to, is that
I'm both. Like I'll forever be both. I think that it's smart to never get rid of your license. I think it's silly to ever think about it that way, because there's a lot of deals that don't meet my criteria, and I'll make my couple bucks. I figured out, and I teach people how to basically scale their commissions to endless amounts of money, because, instead of just seeing it through, the problem is that realtors see life through a keyhole. You know what I'm saying? Like, they only see it through, how do I list this property and make my 2 or 3%?
Right.
I see a piece of property and say, what is the most profitable way to make money on this deal?
Right.
And I just do that one thing.
Right.
And sometimes it is listing it. Just most of the time it's not.
Just most of the time it's not. I think it's especially in times of incredible uncertainty. It sure is nice to be able to just broker a property. You can offset a lot of risk and you can still get a payday. And it's
100%.
And like,
listen, a good portion of, I still, I'm doing, somewhere between 3 and 6 transactions a month, but just like, the number I was doing 120 residential sales to make half of what I'm making. It's just because it's just a little bit different of a focus.
120 residential sales to make the numbers just don't seem to
add up.
They don't add up. Absolutely not. No, I love that. And that's the idea behind, a lot of what we talk about in this show is how to scale, how to grow, how to tack a zero onto the same amount and or less effort than what you're doing right now.
100%.
So that is awesome. You are known for finding off-market deals. Obviously, you told us this. You've placed 400,000 calls. What are you focusing on right now in the off-market commercial real estate space?
Yeah, so I think that the only things that matter, the only metrics that we count are most important in our companies is conversations, which we just talked about. I had a lot of them. Right. And then the second thing is contracts and just writing as many as you can every day. Right. So it's like you could have, I think the biggest mistake people make is they don't make enough offers. Just because a deal, you get a deal doesn't, write an offer on every property you get. Majority are going to say no. We both know that, but there is going to be a large percentage that say yes, just because you started putting your numbers on, put pen to paper. And I just don't think enough people do that. So, we're trying to write, somewhere between, 5 and 10 contracts a day. And it just, your numbers skyrocket when you start thinking of, only focusing on certain metrics, because it's like the only metric that actually puts money in your pocket is writing a contract. Everything leads to it, but a contract written actually leads to money in your pocket.
How are you when you say writing a contract? Because there's kind of I'm either putting on my broker hat or I'm putting on
letter of intent.
Okay, yeah. So you're saying LOIs.
We lead with letters of intent, right? So what'll happen is, like, I'll give you an example. We have a guy who called, one of our sales guys calls this person. He's got an 8 family in a local town near us. He wants to sell it for 170 grand a unit. It's probably worth 180, 185 grand a unit. So there's a good decent amount of spread on the deal. What I'll do is I'll send him a letter of intent for me to be the purchaser.
Right.
Okay. What'll happen is then I'll work on, either brokering it or wholesaling it, double closing on the deal if I choose to, or I'll just close on it for 170 grand a unit, which is what we might do. It just depends on what we end up doing towards the end.
Right. So you guys, conversations and contracts, tell us how you spooled your team back up, because you went from 13, I think, down to 2.
Yeah. So, so basically the only thing the biggest mistake that I made was that, I was I hired way too quickly, and I would bring people on just for the heck of it. Right. And don't get me wrong. It's like, it's sort of the mentality of there's a task that needs to be done and you don't want to do it. So you hire it out.
Right.
Instead, now what I do is that I'll say, what is the least amount of employees, the least amount of people possible to make sure X, Y, and Z tasks get completed. And I'll only, I'll only hire through an insatiable profit. Right. So it's like, unless an incredible amount of profits coming in where, like, one thing is just absolutely, and like, it's super necessary to hire an additional person, because you're talking, if you just give another employee $1 raise, okay, to give them 1 or 2 or 3 extra tasks, think about the savings instead of hiring somebody again at another $20 an hour to do a simple task.
Right.
So before I didn't see the difference. I know it sounds kind of obvious, but listen, I'm 24, 25 years old when I had that kind of staff. So I was just having fun with it.
Yeah, man, that's fantastic. But to do that in the short of time as you've done, I mean, you've made some fast moves. It's for a lot of us, and I'm a slow learner, probably slower thinker. It takes me a while before, like, I get the message where it's like, oh, okay, I've been doing this for 9 months and maybe I should change it. But to move at the pace at which you did, it's like daily. It's an iterative process on a daily basis for you with rapid tweaks to what you were doing. How did you know when you were doing the right thing versus doing the wrong thing?
I'm a freak when it comes to self-development. So I've been in coaching for a long time. I've been a part of every type of coaching group you could possibly imagine, from just specifically real estate to business to sales to entrepreneurship to leadership to you name it. I'm a sponge to it. Like I know that I heard a long time ago that, listen, if Michael Jordan had a coach from the day he started playing basketball to the day, the day he retired, why don't you have a coach? And I was like, that's probably a good idea. So I got a coach, and I'm obsessed with self-development. So I'm constantly learning, constantly adapting, and just kind of always being a student, just having a student's mindset. Like I just don't know everything. I'm open to, I love when people disagree with me, tell me why, and maybe I'll adapt it. Maybe, I don't know everything. I'm open to it.
Right. No, that's awesome. What are some of the mistakes? You said, you made a lot of mistakes, and I think we learn as much probably more from mistakes as we do than we do our successes. What were some of the mistakes, other than maybe overstaffing and not watching your budget, that you made, in your, call it pre-COVID/COVID business?
Let's see, a couple of mistakes. A big one is not questioning everything, where I had one way of thinking. And just because you think that way of thinking works doesn't mean there's not a way of thinking that works better, if not way better, if not to a point where you've never thought that you could possibly make that work ever. I'll give you a quick example. Call it January of last year, about a year and a half ago, right? I met my fiance. I just had my engagement party this past weekend. And when I met her, I was working 120 hours a week. And I would just make up the excuse that I love working. And then I was obsessive with what I do. And, some people can agree with me and some people could say I'm crazy for it, but I was just 24/7, 365 working. I loved it. I was at the office from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. at night. Now I work 2-3 hours a day. It's just and I make 4 times as much money with a lot less stress. And it kind of forced me into a way of thinking that I never thought was possible, which was, if you can structure your company to look any way you want to. It's just you get with what you put up with, right? You get what you settle for. And I settled for thinking that I had to work 120 hours a week in order to make great money. And don't get me wrong, it got me to, a great income. I had no time freedom, and then I was like, I guess the only way to make more money is to work more, which is false.
Right.
And I just had to restructure the way I do business, which is now what, being, more on the private equity investment side. And again, looking at every deal for what is the most profitable way for me when I look at a piece of real estate.
How are you training your team to make, 5 or 10 offers a day, conversations and contracts? How are you training your team to get that many LOIs out? That makes sense when you're even, let's say all those get accepted. Obviously they're an LOI, so they're not binding, but even if half of them every day get accepted, how do you know that you're even making offers that make any reasonable amount of sense for you as an investor?
So, this initiative is basically bottlenecked by me. So I'm the last one who reviews something, or as long as one of my partners who I trust. But we will write LOIs that we know that if they got accepted, I could sell it for a decent profit no matter what. If worst case scenario, broker it for 10 or 20 or 50 grand, at a worst case scenario. So we're not exactly going in at retail. And, but listen, it's, every day it's not 10. Most of the time it's somewhere between 2 and 5. Our metrics is every single person on the team needs to write up 1 contract today above everything else. You can fall short at every category, write an LOI today. Right. And it's just it's so interesting where if you find the right metric, your business can double in a matter of 90 days. And it's so fascinating. Because if you think about it, if you tell your team you need to focus on making calls, right? Focus on making calls, make your calls. And you're telling them you got to make $50 a day, $100, $200 a day. Guess what? That may lead to money, but it's not guaranteed. If you tell them now, you need to, focus on conversations or focus on appointments, it may lead to money, it doesn't guarantee. But the one thing that more importantly than anything is contracts. And if you write more contracts than any other team, you're probably going to make more money than any other team.
That is awesome. I love it. Find the right metric, measure that metric. Man, that's really powerful stuff. How have you brought the right team members on? I'm sure that in your, rapid scaling approach, which I love, maybe there's been some missteps, maybe there's been the right steps. How have you done it in such a way without getting burned out, bringing people on board?
As Gary Vaynerchuk once said, hire fast, fire faster. Look, I'll give everybody a chance, like as long as I got a couple key things. Like I can train you on the logistics. I can't train you on mindset. I can't train you on personality. I can't train you on how you approach it, like your attitude. I can't train people on that, but if you're open, coachable, loyal, respectful, I can teach you the rest. So it's like, if anybody matches those criteria from like a disc assessment purpose, I'll do a disc on everybody. But if, again, if you're personable, I can make everything else happen. Obviously, I'm not going to put a salesperson role into a contract role because they're going to freak out and want to leave tomorrow. But, so that's why the disc assessment comes into play. But if they're cancerous to your team, I've learned like one of the mistakes I made a while back was that I wouldn't get rid of the cancerous people. I would wait till they left because I hated firing people. And then I realized that like I'm only hurting myself by doing that. So now we just get rid of them. The second we feel like there's any type minimum, like it's smallest little thing, if there's any type of thing that's even leading towards the wrong stuff, get rid of them immediately.
Yeah, and that's tough. I mean, because there's I've always hated firing people. Like it's just it's like the worst day of my life when it's like, hey, look, this just isn't working. But what I've discovered as I've gotten older is one is it's bad for them to keep them around. It's bad for you to keep them around. It's just altogether bad.
Bad for the team.
Bad for the team. Yeah, morale goes down. People don't like. It's like, hey, it's just bad. It's just bad.
There is nothing positive when it comes to having an employee that should not be with your team. There's nothing positive about it. And
it may not be that they're bad people. It could just be a bad fit. It could be the bad role. It could be just, hey, this is not the right job for you. And it's not that you're say, I hate you. And I don't, it's just, this is just not a right fit. There's a good old boy here in Memphis that he always said, Sam, hey, when's the first time that you should fire somebody? I'm like, well, I don't know. He said, the first time you think about it. I'm like,
100%.
That's interesting. Like, and I've said that on that quote on the show before because I found it to be pretty profound in the sense that it's like he's never been wrong. I've never not eventually gotten to that point where it's like, hey, look, we're breaking up. Real sorry, but you got to go.
Yeah, like it's like I've never regretted. Also, like if I felt like they needed to go, I've never regretted letting them go.
No, and again, this comes from I think maybe for me, I get the sense that same from you. It comes from a place of love, where it's 100%. Like, look, this is what's best for you. It's best for us. You got to go. So that's really cool. I love your approach there, where it's like, hey, when this just isn't working, it's just not working.
Agreed.
And in that way to nip that in the bud is that's really powerful. It takes courage, but it is powerful. Tell me, you mentioned there you're a self-development freak. One, self-development, coaches, mentors, those can be incredibly expensive investments in yourself. What would you say to somebody who maybe is starting out on a budget? They're starting out and they're going, hey, you know what? I need some self-development help, but maybe I don't have $100,000 to put into self-development personal coaches this year. What do you tell that person?
I'll say two things. Number one, if you found somebody for $100,000, God, I don't know what to do. I know I'm just saying. But listen, like I would go into debt for yourself, right? I would get a credit card and I would go into debt and I would get a coach immediately because the return on investment for investing in yourself is such, it's as close to infinite as you can possibly imagine. I've spent nearly $500,000 in the last 7 years investing in myself. And I can tell you as a two-time college dropout, there is no way, shape, and form that I should be making the money that I am without having the education the self-education, right? Like, I'm a freak about education. I think it's literally the only reason why I am here today and I'm on the track I am. And, I wouldn't have met some of the people I have. It's like a shortcut. When I'm coaching people, I always say, like, listen, if I could tell you that if you could spend every dollar that you spent investing in yourself is one more dollar per year that you'll make for the rest of your life, how much money would you spend?
As much as I can get my hands on.
That's the point. That's how I think about it too, right? Like I've never spent money investing in myself and it's never been a bad investment.
That's awesome. What advice would you give? Because I'm going to preface my own question with just give a preface to it, which is that I feel like there's a lot of people selling not bogus, but just kind of courses and things that it's just like there's a lot of garbage out there being peddled as self-help, as development. How do you cut through the noise and find the gold?
Yeah, listen, I would probably first off, start with the people who are at the top. Like, go learn from like the people who are like the big people, like people like Grant Cardone, Tony Robbins, Ed Milet, Andy Frisella, people who are like, like they're worth a ton of money because of the companies they've built. And now they're doing it from a place of like, I just want to help people, and stop starting with people like you've never heard of. And like, also like, look, I run a small coaching thing, right? Like, just because I had like literally dozens and dozens of people who just asked me to coach them, and I'm like, I guess I should do something, right? But I tell everybody on the call, like, the biggest difference between me and other people, and I never pitch my course, but the biggest thing I tell them is like, I make 95% or more of my income from everything in real estate.
Right.
And less than 5% from my coaching business. And it will stay that way for the rest of my life. It's the same thing with Grant Cardone. It's the same way with Andy Frisella, Tony. I mean, like, all these huge people who are incredibly successful. A small percentage of that is from coaching because they care,
right,
and they want to help you, not because they need the money for their business, or to live.
There you go. That's the gold answer I was looking for, and I hadn't quite thought about it that way. But it's absolutely correct. It's the phrase I use is the guru, but no do. It's the person that, like, they're going to sell you a real estate coaching course, but you're like, so do you actively do real estate? They're like, well, I did 30 years ago. You're like, right.
Doesn't make any sense.
Okay, I'm next. Like, no, I'm not buying.
Those who can't teach, like, that's just what ends up happening. Like, if you fail as an investor, you might as well teach people how to invest.
Right, and that's not entirely true, but it's it does give you an easy way to kind of cut out a lot of the noise. So that's awesome, Henry. I love what you've done. I love the way you've built it. I love the fact that you're a 2-time college dropout that yet self-proclaims, I love education. I mean, it's one of those things that I too, I hated school, but I love to learn. And it's 100%. Just, I love to learn. I'm a voracious reader, love to digest and find new information and kind of internalize it, but I can't do school either. So that's really cool. I love what you've done here. You've shared with us all kinds of really cool tips and tricks. You've shared with us some mistakes you've made and how to avoid those. We talked about hiring and building a team. We've covered, finding off-market commercial real estate deals and how you boil it down to 2 things: conversations and contracts, and how you hold your team accountable with that. So lots of great stuff here that you've presented to us today. Certainly appreciate it. If our listeners want to get in touch with you or learn more about you, what is the best way to do that?
Just Google my name, Henry Eisenstein. I promise you I'll, and look, reach out, DM me, I'm always here to support.
Absolutely. We'll make sure you put those links there in the show notes. And Henry, thank you again for coming on today. Certainly appreciate it.